Hi, everyone. It's Let's Build Deso with Kenny J. And today we are going to build a simple bot for Deso. And we're going to use Python this time. So we're going to go back to Python and we are going to use Replit. So how are we going to do this? We're going to write the code in Python within the Replit IDE. And then we're going to have another technology, Uptime robot, which will trigger the running of the code that we will create. So even though we're going to do Python, we're actually going to create a Flask app, which is a simple API framework that we can use Python to program with. And so we're going to create that, and we're going to create a endpoint URL that's going to run our code that we want. And we're going to make sure that this Replit is set to always on. And that way, even when we're not working on it, it's still running in the background and able to receive requests from the internet. In order to have that option, you do have to be a paying customer for Replit, but it's a pretty cheap price. Like it's the entry level price. So you can look into that. Uptime Robot, it's a website for monitoring your other websites. So usually what you do is you have, mywebsite.com, and you'd put it into Uptime Robot. You'd set the parameter to have Uptime Robot check your website maybe every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes. And if it was down, then it would send you a text or an email letting you know so you could go in and fix it. We're going to do what we're doing today is a little bit of a hack. Instead of testing to see if this web service of ours is operating, we're going to use it to trigger that code that we want to execute. So the little project we're going to work on today is I mentioned to my wife, I said, oh, we should, she has like hundreds of book reviews on Goodreads. And I'm like, I think people on Deso might find those interesting and helpful. What if we kind of over time put those on Deso? And she said, great, have fun doing it. So I got tasked with this, and I didn't want to have to go in and type in once a day or every couple of days. I thought, okay, if I can scrape this information out into a nice format, then I would be able to automate publishing a post to her feed. So what we'll do is it'll post a book review once a day. I might set it for every 3 days. The book review will come from a list on the server. So I'm just going to have a JSON file on the server that it'll read from. And what it will do is grab that first JSON object that in Python, you'd call it a dictionary, and it would pop that off the list. And that is the one we would send to Deso. And then it would save the remainder of that list back to the server. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our REPL for this to work. So I'm going to do create new REPL. And in the past, when it comes up, we usually would choose Python, but here we're going to type in Flask and choose that, and we'll give it a name. So what you're going to do is get this generic empty kind of hello world, well, literally hello world Flask app, and we hit run, and we see it's right there, hello world. And in this case, we're not passing back JSON or XML like a web service would. Here we're just passing back good old HTML, and it's being rendered in a browser. You'll notice that our route here, this is where our API endpoint would go. And this is a decoration for this particular function, this hello world function, which runs this code. So what will we do if we wanted to have a different endpoint? Well, we can just copy this, paste that here. Of course, it's not going to like that because we have now 2 hello world functions. Let's first, we'll do Melanie, that's my wife, reviews, and what the heck, we'll just name this function the same thing. There we go. And instead of hello world, it will say Kenny rocks. Okay. In between, you have to hit stop and start anytime you make a change, it's not going to do a hot reload like some environments do, and that's fine. Now, the other little quirk here is you can't go in here and hack the URL and put like a /. So what we end up having to do is we'll click on this open in a new tab, and we get that. And now I can do / Melanie reviews, hit return, and there we go, Kenny rocks. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to want this endpoint to do a little bit more than just return Kenny rocks, right? I mean, that is pretty important, but we'll go ahead and add a little bit more. And I'll just do a little bit of pseudocode right now, and then we can walk through the different steps that we'll want to do. The first thing we're going to want to do is check to make sure that we haven't already posted for this day. Like, we don't want to accidentally post 3, 4, 5 all in the same day. So we'll do check if able to post. And then next we'll want to have a function that will get the data from this JSON that you'll see and format it into a pretty kind of format that will actually post to deso. So we'll say get formatted data. And then next we'll go ahead and post that data to deso. We'll go ahead and use Aditya's Python library. Then, as kind of a bookend to this check if able to post, because here you'll see we're going to record a date, and it's going to check to see if today's date is greater than or equal to that date that we're allowed to post. Now here, once we've posted, we want to write back to that file and put the future date, like 3 days from now, when we'll be able to post again. So we're going to write the new published date. And then lastly, we're going to return information. And in this case, we'll go ahead and return just kind of HTML, but we'll use the pre-tags so that we can see in a browser the same way that it'll be formatted in deso. Okay, so first, let's go ahead and add the data, the JSON data that we're going to be using. So I'm going to call it Melanie reviews.json. And there I pasted it in, and we can see the reviews. And you can see I have a couple different key value pairs here. I've got title, the author, how many stars, and the review text. Yours might not have all this. Maybe you just have text and that's it. But you'll see what we're going to do here. We're going to try to lay it out so it's kind of pretty. So let's work on this one first, this get formatted data. I'm going to create another Python file. We'll have a function here that it'll grab the data, format it, and send it back to the calling procedure. Okay, so I'm just going to create a function called post review. We'll do a little pseudocode here. Open the JSON, pop the first review off the stack. We'll format the review. We'll save the JSON back to file. This time it will no longer have this review that we popped off the stack, so it'll just be the remaining ones. And then finally, we'll return the formatted review. Okay, first we'll go ahead and open that review. We already know it's called Melanie, or that JSON, we already know it's called Melanie reviews. And we're getting little red squigglies because we need to import our JSON library. There we go. Next, we're going to want to pop that first one off the stack. So we'll say first review equals reviews. And we could do pop, but remember in Python, with a list, it's the last item in the list, which is the first one to get popped off. So it's a first in, last out, or a last in, first out. But there's a way around that. We can pop something by index. So if I give it the index 0, that's that first one, which to me is first, and we'll pop that off the top. So in other words, This one is at index 0. This will get popped off the stack and it will leave reviews, everything else minus this. And formatting the review, we'll use an F string and we'll use cute little emojis in there and some return characters. And then here we have, I didn't define that yet. I want to be able to have 4 or 5 emoji stars. So what we can do here is create a variable called stars, and we take this emoji as a string, and we use in Python, if you multiply a string times an integer, it's concatenating that string integer amount of time. So that's all we're doing here. So when we look at reviews and stars right here, in this case, star is the integer 5. So it will be 5 times this string emoji star. So stars will be a row of 5 emojis, and then I inject that right here. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead and save that JSON file back. And remember, I don't have to remove anything because the pop function kind of does 2 things at the same time. First, it returns the value of that first item in the list. And second, the reviews in place, it removes that first item from the list. So all we have to do is save reviews back to this Melanie reviews JSON. And if you'll notice, remember, and I always have to remind my students about this in our Python class, we do it first with R because we're going to be reading the object. And we do it here with a W because now we're going to be writing back to the object. And then finally, we're going to do return. And what do we want to return? This review for posting. There we go. I'm just going to clean this up real quick. There we go. So this nice function, it'll go to the JSON, grab the first one, format it, save it back, and then return that formatted string. So in order to use that, we're going to have to, from Melanie review, import post review. There we go. So here, all we need to do is do review and post review. And how about, we'll just clean this, we'll just put this in there right now so we don't have to worry about it later. I'm going to change these to pre. So this means it will not do any of its own HTML formatting. And I'll make this an F string, and right in here, I'll remove that and I'll put in my curly braces so I can inject in there. And what am I going to inject? I'm going to inject this review. Okay, one little problem I need to correct is I had an S in there. There we go. So I need to make sure that those match. Now let's go ahead, we'll hit stop, we'll hit run. And right now, let's take a look at this again. It's all formatted with 6 of crows up on top. Let's go ahead and break this out again. And we'll do / Melanie reviews. And there we go. There's our nice little formatted review with emojis and spaces and everything. And now if I hit refresh, it'll grab the next one. And if I hit refresh again, so now if we go back here, we'll see, for one, Python went ahead and took out all my nice little formatting. That's fine. But you'll see that it took away, it popped off the top, the Lee Bordugo book and this David McCullough book. And so the next one should be Hattie Big Sky. I hit refresh. There we go, Hattie Big Sky, and it's no longer there. So good, we know that's working. Okay, next, let's go back up to this check if able to post. So I'm gonna create a new file here. I'm gonna call it schedule_check.py. It's blank. I went ahead and created this beforehand, and we don't need to go through all of this, but it's a class. It has 3 functions. It'll get the next run date. It'll schedule the run date, and then we can ask it, can it be run? And so this is what we'll want to do first. We'll want to call this can be run, and this will look to see what the publish date is, what the next possible publish date is. And you can see it right here, if today is greater than the publish day that we're going to allow it to, it'll return true. And then we can pop the next one off the stack and keep going. If today is still less than, right? We're not to this publish day yet. It's going to return false, and then we'll just gracefully get out of the program. And that way, if someone keeps, like we did right now, someone keeps hitting refresh, we won't keep posting all of those together. This will help make sure that we can space things out. So what do we do here? We'll go ahead and import that class, and we'll go ahead and we'll instantiate an object from that. And the two variables or arguments I'm passing in, Melanie_schedule.json. This is the file where it's going to store that date. And the 3, this is how many days I want in between each publication. As you can see, this doesn't exist yet, but I went ahead and created that little class so that if it doesn't exist, it'll create it. So next, what we want to do is see if we're able to run it. So we'll go ahead and we'll call the can-be-run method. And if it's true, then we want to continue on. But if it's false, if it can't be run, then we want to exit gracefully. So that's why I'm saying if not can be run, return, and we'll just say not time yet. So let's go ahead and stop, start. And when we're initializing it, it will go ahead and take today's date and add 3 to it while it's doing that. So then when we check this, that date is 3 days in the future. So that's why it's saying not time yet. And let's just look really quickly at what it's saved to. This is all it is. Next run date, we can see that it's the 22nd, which is 3 days from now. Now, if I change this back to the 17th and today's the 18th, then if I hit refresh, it'll process the next one. So there we go. But while doing that, you'll see it hasn't changed the date. So we need to call the second half, the bookend of this, in order to change that date. So let's do that. And that's just a simple call to schedule run date. So let me start, stop, there we go. Let's hit refresh. So it went ahead, and because it was still the 17th, so yesterday was the published date, so anything beyond that's okay, it went ahead and processed that. But now if I hit refresh, now if we look, it went ahead and changed that date to the 22nd. So I could sit here and hit refresh for the next 3 days and nothing's going to happen until finally it's the 22nd, and then it will be able to pop the next one off the stack. Okay, so next, really all we have left is to write it. So how do we do that? Well, let's go ahead and we'll search for deso, and that'll pull up Aditya's module. I'm going to hit install package. It'll take a few seconds. Okay, that's done. First, we're going to import the Python deso library. And then remember, we're going to need the seed hex and the public key in order to get this to work. And if you remember, we go to secrets and we add in the key and the value. So here we would do seed hex, and this is where you would go and find your seed hex. And I did that in another video. If you recall, go to developer tools and go to application, and then you look at local storage, that kind of thing. And you'd put that in there and save that. And then also your public key. And I go over how to do that in the other video, and you put that in there. So now we want to import those so we can use them. And I'm getting red squigglies here because I didn't import the OS library. Import OS. Should be happy. There we go. Now it just says, why aren't you using these? And in order to instantiate that post object, I'll just say P equals post. And this is where you give it the seed hex and the public key. And we just do the send method. And we're not going to be sending pictures or post extra data, just content. So I'm going to grab this formatted review, stick it in there, and that should do everything we need. So I'm going to go ahead and replace my seed hex and public key with the proper one, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, I'm back. I went ahead and filled those in, and I actually did it for Kenny J test. I'm not going to post to Melanie's, my wife's account, because we're just testing. Okay, so let's do a stop and a start. We'll go ahead and remember, if we hit refresh right now, it's still not timed. So we're going to have to go back in here and hack this. We'll put this back to yesterday. And I don't have to start and stop here because it reads from these files in real time. So here, I'm going to hit refresh. And it comes back with Saint Anything, Sarah Dessen. Let's check this, hit refresh. And there we go, Saint Anything, Sarah Dessen. It works. Okay, so how do we set up Uptime Robot to do this for us? Well, that's pretty simple. We go to uptime.robot, and then I would create a new monitor. I click add monitor, or yeah, add new monitor. And under monitor type, I would say HTTPS, and I give it a friendly name like I have up there, Melanie's Reviews. And I would take the URL that I want it to test, and I would put it in here. And then, like I said, I can set this all the way to 24 hours, but sometimes it will do it more than every 24 hours, which is why we put that stop gap in there. But I'll go ahead and set it that way. And then I would create monitor. Now, keep in mind, every time that you create it, it will run that monitor immediately, or anytime you update and you hit save, it'll run it immediately. I don't know if that matters to you. It mattered to me on a project, so I thought I would point that out. Now I've already have one in place, so I'm going to hit close. And that's pretty much it. Let me review what we went over real quickly. We created our list. We created a function that allows us to pop the first one off the top and save the rest back. We created an endpoint, Melanie Reviews. And then we went ahead and tried it out and it worked. And then we went to Uptime Robot to configure it. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. I did a particular kind of bot where I wanted to space out posts so it just didn't slam stuff. But you could use the logic we went over today to make your own kind of bot. And your imagination's your limitation, I guess. Anyway, this is Kenny J, and this has been Let's Build Deso.